My name is Gina, and I'm 32 years old. I'm an accountant in a medium-sized trading company. Not that this is my dream job, but it consistently pays the bills, allows you to buy food, gasoline, and from time to time a pair of new shoes for sale. I live alone in a small rented apartment on the east side of the city, where the walls are paper thin and the smells from other people's kitchens almost replace my own culinary efforts. The apartment is tiny, one bedroom, a tiny balcony on which only an old chair and my worn-out sense of independence can fit, but it's cozy in my own way. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. Every other Saturday, I get in the car, turn on the radio, and drive halfway across town to my parents' house for dinner. It has become almost a mechanical action, like pouring your morning coffee or closing the door behind you. It's a part of the routine that, no matter how much I want to, I can't get rid of. Sometimes when I'm driving, I find myself thinking that I would much rather stay at home, get comfortable on the couch in my pajamas, and watch another season of some British detective story where everyone is so polite and no one calls you to help with the dishes, but family is family. That's what Mom always says, and oddly enough, as we get older, this phrase begins to sound not like a reproach but like an inevitability, like the changing of the seasons. This Saturday started exactly the same as all the previous ones. I drove up to my parents' house, already knowing that I would find the same things there as always. Noise, fuss, the smell of fried chicken, and a mixture of comfort and fatigue that is difficult to describe, but easy to recognize. My sister Jennifer's old Honda was already parked in front of the house, battered as if after a tumultuous marriage. The car, like Jennifer herself, had long since lost its luster, but it continued to drive, albeit creaking. Jennifer is 3 years older than me. She's 35 and has 3 children: Emma, who recently turned 12, Jake, a 10-year-old who enjoys fighting with his sisters, and baby Sophie, who recently celebrated her 8th birthday. The kids are good, don't get me wrong, it's hard with them, especially when they come all at once like a hurricane capable of sweeping away order, silence, and your plans for the evening in one rush. And Jennifer's been divorced for 2 years now, after her husband Doug finally disappeared from her life, and as you might guess from the lives of her children, her days became a series of events that alternately delight, frighten, and surprise, but almost never pass quietly. And in this whirlwind, like in an old movie, me, Mom, Dad, and everyone who is able to somehow keep their balance, try not to lose their balance. The fact is that our parents pay half of her rent, and I pay the other half, and I'm not complaining. At least not out loud. It's not the children's fault that adults do stupid things. They didn't ask for such a life. But sometimes when I wake up late at night with back pain, remembering how I carried Sophie and cooked dinner for all 5 of us, I think, would Jennifer have tried harder if we hadn't made her path easier? If it wasn't for this constant lifeline, wouldn't she finally start rowing by herself? I knocked on a familiar door, and I was greeted by almost native chaos. The screams of children interrupting each other. My mother's voice sounding on the verge of screaming and singing. She was always either panicking or having a feast. There was never any middle ground. And of course the unbearably loud TV on which my father was watching another match for baseball or football. I stopped distinguishing what he was watching a long time ago, as long as it was loud and with a replay of the moments. Gina is here, Mom shouted, opening the door, as if I hadn't rung the doorbell, but had fallen from the sky. Mom is 58, she still works half days at a nearby library, and she has the amazing ability to turn any little thing into the drama of the century or a grand event. I call it her inner opera. And Dad, well, Dad just nodded without looking up from the screen. He's 61, retired from the post office last year, and now he mostly either watches sports shows or tells everyone what pills the doctor prescribed him and how much they cost. "Hi, kid," he said with his usual dryness. "How's work?" "It's the same as before," I replied, smiling. "The numbers don't lie, but people of course try their best to make it seem like they're lying." He grinned and turned back to the screen. I went into the kitchen, where Jennifer was trying to stop Sophie from pulling Jake's hair, while Emma was sitting at the counter with her phone, as if what was happening didn't concern her at all. A typical evening. This is my sister, Jennifer, beautiful blonde, with eyes of such a bright heavenly shade that she manages to convince people of anything just by looking into their faces. And everything would be fine if she wasn't so sure that everyone around her exists in order to solve her problems. After the divorce, her main goal was to find a new husband, And while she's looking, the children end up either with mom, dad, or most often, with me. She shows up at my house at least twice a week after work, with the kids at the ready, as if I'm a free kids club. She always has the same expression on her face. A mixture of guilt and feigned gratitude, that's the look that says, "I'm not comfortable asking, but you're not going to say no anyway, are you?" "Hi Gina," she'll say, throwing her bag on the floor. "I know it's at the last moment, but I have a date tonight. I really need someone to look after the kids." And what should I tell her? No. Let the children handle themselves because their mother is not capable of planning? In the end, everything, as usual, ends with me canceling my own plans, even if it's just an evening with a book and silence, ordering a large pizza for 4, always one with pepperoni, one with cheese, and trying to somehow keep order among the 3 children, while trying to persuade them to make homemade tasks that they all hate as one. Emma is easier to deal with. She's almost a teenager now, immersed in herself, with that sad look over her phone, as if she's too old for all this fuss and too tired to participate in life. She rarely argues and mostly sits quietly. But there is tension behind this silence, like a taut string. But Jake and Sophie are a real natural disaster. 2 small hurricanes with an eternal lack of attention and an overabundance of energy. They fight all the time, argue over toys, chase each other, squeal when I ask them to eat, and always demand that someone turn on cartoons. They are insanely selective in their food. Jake doesn't eat green. Sophie doesn't like it when food touches other pieces of food on her plate. And all this time I'm like a participant in a reality show called How Not to Go Crazy in 2 hours. By the time Jennifer returns, usually around 11 in the evening, tired, but for some reason happy, as if her date was a breath of air after diving into the pool, I already feel like everything has gone out of me. Patience, energy, and to be honest, the desire to talk to anyone at all. The children finally fall asleep anywhere. Someone on my couch, someone in an armchair wrapped in blankets, like tiny sleeping bags with troubles, and Jennifer, habitually picking up sleeping babies, will whisper to me, "You are the best sister in the world. I do not know what I would do without you." And then she leaves, leaving behind empty pizza boxes, toys on the floor, and a nagging question in my head. Why do I never say no? And weekends are generally a special category because on weekends Jennifer and her mom decide for some reason that they definitely need to go shopping, to the mall, or God forgive me, to IKEA, and of course the only person who, in their opinion, has nothing to do is me. They don't ask, they're just talking. It's like it goes without saying that I don't have my own life, my own plans, my own needs. They're sure I'm just waiting to be given another mission to save the world. I tried to talk, of course restrained, not wanting to create a scandal. Something like, "Jen, I could use some personal time too. Or maybe let's at least make a schedule so that everything doesn't happen at the last minute." But every time I started a conversation, she immediately started crying. The tears flowed instantly, as if there was a switch behind them, and the monologue began about how difficult it is to be alone, how hard it is to raise children without support, how she just needs to find someone who will be a father to them, and how she cannot afford not to go on dates because otherwise she will be left alone forever. And as soon as I tried to get a word in, my parents would jump in unison. It was as if they had rehearsed in advance. They would start their favorite aria on the theme, "Family is the main thing." "And you won't leave your sister in a difficult moment, will you, Gina?" And suddenly I would turn from an adult woman into an egotist who for some reason doesn't want to help. She's selfish. It's as if I haven't invested time, money, and effort in keeping their lives afloat for the past 2 years. But tonight's dinner was different. As soon as we sat down at the table, I felt that something was going on. Jennifer had the expression she usually keeps for special occasions, a slightly strained smile, beaming at the same time, as if she had just won the lottery, and constantly making eye contact with mom and dad, full of some kind of secret family agreement. I already knew what that meant. Something was brewing. "So," she said, slicing the stew as if it were the intro to a symphony, "I have some news." My parents nodded almost simultaneously, as if they knew in advance what was going to be discussed. I didn't even have time to be surprised. "I met someone," Jennifer continued, pushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "His name is David. He's really wonderful. We've been together for 3 weeks now." "That's great, honey," Mom said, and her voice sounded like she was talking about engagement, not dating. "The thing is, Jennifer, I really think it could be serious," her sister interrupted. "He's not like the others at all. He's stable, he has a good job, he's looking for a real relationship." And all of that would be great, but I sat across from him and waited because it's never just good news with Jennifer. If she tells you something, it means there will be a request soon, and I was not mistaken. The only thing, she said, glancing at the children, who meanwhile were turning dinner into chaos. Sophie had already started throwing peas at Jake, and Emma was quietly rolling her eyes. I haven't told him about Emma, Jake, and Sophie yet. I just want to make sure everything is serious between us first before dragging the kids into this. Sure, I already knew where everything was going. She never shares her joy for nothing. Behind any joy there is a hidden plan. A need, a decision that she wants me to make, and it came. David invited me for the weekend, she said as casually as she could, though her eyes were sparkling. There's a mountain resort 2 hours away. He rented a cabin, just the two of us. I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. That's it. I could say I was surprised, but she wasn't, not at all. The thing is, she continued, already looking me straight in the eye, not hesitating for a second, I need someone to look after the kids just for the weekend from Saturday morning to Sunday evening. I put my fork on the edge of my plate, carefully, calmly. This weekend, Jennifer? Cannot? The second I said, I can't. There was such a tense silence in the room, as if someone had turned off the sound in the universe. Even the kids stopped fighting. Sophie froze with half a carrot in her hand, and Jake stared at me with his mouth slightly open. Emma, who was still holding the phone, looked up and looked like she had just woken up from a bad dream. But before Jennifer could say anything, her mother's voice rang out, soft but with that steely edge I'd known since childhood. Gina, dear, your sister is more important than some friend's birthday. Some kind of girlfriend? I felt something snap inside me, as if a strained string in my chest had finally snapped. My voice became higher than usual and much louder. Amy is my best friend since college, Mom. We've been through everything together. Exams, moves, broken hearts, parties, fights, and reconciliations. This is not just some kind of girlfriend. This is a person who has always been there for you. And I'm already tired of being the default babysitter every time Jennifer has another romantic adventure. Tears instantly appeared in Jennifer's eyes as if she had been waiting for this. They were like on a button. One word and they flowed. I can't believe you're acting like this, she whispered, holding a napkin to her nose. It's cruel. I couldn't stand it and got up from the table. Cruel? I'm a realist. I'm already babysitting your kids twice a week, paying half of your rent. And yet you dare say I'm being cruel because I finally have my own plans? When the hell am I going to start my own life? Mom's eyes became as cold as the February sky. You're selfish, she said with that unfailing confidence that would move mountains. You know how hard it is for Jennifer. She needs to get her personal life back on track. If you were a real sister, you would understand that. Then maybe, I said, no longer choosing my words, she should tell David that she has 3 children, instead of lying and pretending that she is a free girl, without a past, without obligations. Jennifer's face turned white in an instant, then pink, then flushed with resentment and anger. Without saying a word, she jumped up and grabbed her purse, children's backpacks, hats, jackets, gloves, all with such haste, as if she was afraid she would change her mind. Sophie began to cry, clinging to her mother's hand, not understanding what was happening and why her beloved aunt was no longer smiling. I just heard the front door slam, then the stairs creaked, and then the engine started. The car drove away, taking with it the noise, tears, and understatement. There was silence in the house, so thick that you could hear the walkers in the hallway counting down the seconds, as if measuring the time that remained before the new scene. And of course it started. Are you happy now? Mom asked, and her voice sounded not like a question, but like an accusation drenched in ice. She's a single mom. It's hard for her. She deserves to find someone who will be a father to her children. I asked, and my voice cracked because more than anything I didn't want to cry in front of them. I don't deserve my life? Don't I deserve to go to my friend's birthday party? You're being selfish, Gina. Family is the main thing. It sounded like a sentence. I paused, then she inhaled, and then she said, Good, if it's so important to you that Jennifer finds personal happiness, and you're both so worried about her, then you can keep an eye on Emma, Jake, and Sophie over the weekend. I can't do this, Mom immediately declared, pressing her hand to the small of her back. My back has been hurting all week. I threw it out when I was moving the bookshelf. My blood pressure is jumping. And the doctor told me to avoid stress. Dad added without even taking his eyes off the TV. And having 3 kids for the whole weekend is not stressful, it's a disaster. And off it went 20 minutes, 20 endless, agonizing minutes during which they both, as if rehearsing in front of a mirror, alternately uttered accusations, reproaches, moral instructions. I was being selfish, I was ungrateful. I didn't know what real responsibility was. Jennifer sacrificed everything for these children. Literally everything. And I, as her younger sister, cannot refuse, must understand this is a family. By the time their monologue ended, I felt like a truck had run over me, then came back and ran over again just in case. They were my parents, the ones who read me fairy tales before going to bed, carried me in their arms when I was sick, and taught me how to ride a bike, those who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And now they looked at me as if I were a stranger, as an enemy. And that's when I gave up, not because she changed her mind, not because I believed they were right, but because she couldn't fight anymore. I said softly, "Okay, I'll keep an eye on them." Mom immediately perked up. Her voice became soft and enveloping again. "Oh, darling, this is just wonderful. I knew you'd understand. You're such a kind, such a good sister." A few days later, I returned home and the first thing I did was dial Amy's number. Her voice, as always, was warm and recognizable, like the smell of your favorite coffee on a cold morning. "Hi girl, how are you? I won't be able to come tomorrow night, family circumstances." "Oh no," she said, and I could almost hear her frown. "Is everything okay?" "It will be. Yes, it's going to be okay. I'm sorry, I know how much you've invested in this evening, how much you've planned." "Don't worry," she interrupted, trying to sound cheerful. "There will be other birthdays." I hung up the phone, but there was a heavy residue in my heart, because somewhere deep inside I suddenly thought, will there be other friendships? Saturday morning came too early, as it always does on those days when you most need to get enough sleep, regain your strength, or just be alone for a while. I was just pouring myself my first cup of coffee, and I hadn't even turned on the music yet, when I heard someone frantically knocking on the door, 9 o'clock sharp in the morning, and there was Jennifer, shining as if the sun had come out from behind the clouds just for her, with a huge smile that looked like it was painted on, and 3 overflowing bags with stuffed toys, rolled up pajamas, and half a pharmacy sticking out of them. "You're just a savior," she exclaimed, practically jumping for joy, until before I could even say hello, I took one of her bags from her. "I've packed everything. Clothes for 2 days, snacks in Emma's bag, although Jake will most likely eat them all for lunch. Oh, and Jake might need an inhaler if he gets too excited. Don't forget, it's in the side pocket." She turned around and disappeared without even waiting for my reply, leaving 3 children in the hallway and the scent of her perfume floating in the air like an afterword. And then the weekend began, which could be filmed in the genre of psychological drama with elements of disaster. Jake and Sophie argued incessantly, shouted, pushed, threw toys at each other, and sparred over every pencil and cookie. Emma was always unhappy, either with lunch, or with the fact that the TV was not occupied with what she wanted to watch, or simply because she was not with her mother. She asked 4 times when she would be back, and every time I tried to explain that my mother was resting, I was met with an icy look and the phrase, "And you are not a mother." No one liked what I was cooking, even macaroni and cheese, which were usually their favorites, caused protests, saying, "Not like Mom's." They complained of boredom, even though my entire apartment had turned into a branch of a toy store, and I kept stumbling over construction kits, dolls, and some sticky objects, the origin of which I was already afraid to find out. By Sunday afternoon, I was feeling exhausted. To put it mildly, I was standing in the kitchen spreading peanut butter on sandwich bread when there was such a crash from the living room that I dropped the knife. I rushed there as if I were saving someone, and found Jake standing rooted to the spot, with a remote control in his hand in front of my cracked screen TV. "I didn't mean to," he immediately exclaimed, and his eyes filled with tears. "Sophie pushed me and I accidentally threw him." "I didn't mean to," Sophie shouted in response, standing at a distance with her arms crossed over her chest. My brand new TV, the one I've been saving up for almost 3 months, denying myself everything from going to cafes to ordering takeaways. The screen was cracked, and it was as if my nerves and the remnants of my calmness had entered into this crack. The rest of the day was spent in full mobilization mode. I was trying to call the service center, while simultaneously keeping the children from another disaster. and cooking dinner from what was left in the refrigerator by 8 o'clock on Sunday evening, when it was already dark and I was almost desperate. There was finally a knock on the door. Jennifer, tanned, relaxed, in a comfortable sweater with the face of a man who had the perfect weekend. "So how did it go?" she asked, not looking back at Sophie, who by that moment had put socks on her hands and was playing marionette theater, or at Jake, who was sitting in the corner building a tower out of DVDs. "They broke my TV," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, what a pity," she replied, shrugging her shoulders as if it were a bent fork. "Well, guys, it's time to go home." And that's it. No apologies, no attempt to offer to share the cost of repairs, no thanks. She just took their hands, turned around and left, as if everything that was happening was something that went without saying. I was left alone in silence with a cracked screen, a sticky carpet smelling of spilled juice, and a feeling like someone had wiped their feet on my kindness. It's been a few weeks. I repaired the TV. It cost me $300, almost the entire monthly quota for everything superfluous. I stayed late at work to catch up on all the things I didn't have time to do over the weekend with the kids. I was trying to get myself back to normal physically and emotionally, and then, as it often happens, it all started with a seemingly ordinary meeting. I went to the grocery store after work to get milk, bread, and maybe some comforting chocolate, when I bumped into Sarah at the refrigerator with frozen vegetables. Sarah was Jennifer's friend, but over the past few years, after all those endless family dinners, parties, and spontaneous get-togethers, we've started to get along pretty well. She was one of the few people who saw how often I found myself in the role of rescuer for my sister. "Gina, hi," she said with a tight smile, as if she already knew the conversation was going to be awkward. "Listen, I need to tell you something. I probably shouldn't, but I think you should know." My heart sank into my stomach. I asked, putting down my shopping basket. Sarah looked around, as if we weren't standing between rows of cereal and frozen pizza. "Yesterday I had coffee with Jennifer. She told me about her plans with David," she began, and I felt everything tighten inside me. "What are your plans?" I asked again. Sarah lowered her voice. "She wants him to move in with her, but she still hasn't told him about the kids." I frowned. "What do you mean?" I choked out, already knowing in advance that I wouldn't like the answer. "She's planning to send Emma, Jake, and Sophie to live with you for a few months so that she would have time to prepare David, to help him get used to the idea that he will have children." I froze. "What?" I asked, looking at Sarah as if I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing. "She thinks you can handle it, that you won't object, you don't have any children of your own, if anything a babysitter can be hired. Well, you probably would have paid her yourself because Jennifer will have a hard time with money if David moves in with her." I thanked Sarah, trying to make my gratitude sound calm and sincere, even though everything was burning inside, not from shame or anger, but from that subtle, exhausting feeling of betrayal that comes when you realize you haven't even been asked. You've just been removed from the equation, put at the end of the list, made a part of who's. That's a lie. I somehow managed to cope with the remaining purchases, walked between the shelves like an automaton, grabbing the first thing I could just to leave the store because all my thoughts revolved around one thing. Jennifer's plan, not rumors, not speculation, not exaggerations, but a carefully thought-out, cynical plan in which she was going to dump her children on me for several months, force me to pay for a babysitter I couldn't afford, and at the same time continue lying to David, pretending to be a woman without a past and without obligations. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Neither the first nor the second. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, and over again imagined coming home from work, tired, hunched over, hoping only for peace and quiet. But instead I was greeted by 3 pairs of eyes full of questions, demands, and childish longing. I imagined counting money, giving up my needs to pay a strange woman who would take care of children who weren't mine while their mother played the perfect relationship. I imagined Jennifer coming out of her apartment all happy, tender, and fresh, and I was sitting in the kitchen with my head full of bills, delaying my life over and over again, and all this because someone decided that I had to. I wanted to talk to her first. I imagined myself calling, talking, shouting, uncensored without trying to be understanding, kind, and patient. I wanted to tell her how selfish she was, how crazy it was to even think about it. I even thought about going to my parents and telling them everything that was boiling over. How blind they are, how their precious daughter uses us all over and over again. But then I realized it wasn't going to work. I knew the script by heart. Mom would start crying, remembering how hard Jennifer's life had been after the divorce. Dad would lecture her about family being sacred, And Jennifer would cry, accusing me of ruining her chance at happiness. And do you know what the scariest thing is? Somehow, despite all my objections, I would have ended up with the kids again. So I decided to do something else more intelligent. Quietly the next morning, I dialed the number of Mr. Peterson, my landlord. He's in his 70s, owns 3 houses in the city, and still runs his own business, prints bills on an old printer, and always picks up the phone the first time. I've always been a good tenant. I paid on time, didn't complain, and kept the apartment in order. Mr. Peterson, this is Gina Mitchell. I need to talk to you about the early termination of the lease for family reasons. I'd like to move out as soon as possible. He paused, then said, Gina, you're one of the best tenants I've ever had. If you can leave by the end of next week, we'll be even. By the way, I already have a couple who are interested in this place. I hung up the phone and suddenly felt like I could breathe deeply for the first time in weeks. I had 2 weeks to pack my things, find a new place to live, and most importantly, get out of Jennifer's reach. I used every lunch break to view ads, call owners, and meet with agents. I needed a place further away, preferably on the other side of town, where I couldn't just stop by on my way to the supermarket. I found the perfect apartment, small but bright, in a new complex by the river. And what is especially pleasant is that the rent was even slightly lower than in the old one. The owner liked that I was reliable, and he agreed to move me in after a week. I took a few days off without telling anyone, not even Amy, to pack up and move in box by box. Day by day, I moved my life to a new place, as if every step brought me closer to freedom. By Thursday, I was already sitting in my new apartment on the floor, among the boxes that hadn't been unpacked yet, with Chinese noodles in my hands and the feeling that I had regained my destiny. I was already starting to dream about how I would spend Saturday alone, without shouting, without asking, without tension. But in the evening the phone rang. Mom. Gina dear. Her voice sounded too cheerful, as if she was trying to sound casual, but I could hear that note of tense expectation. We wanted to invite you to dinner on Saturday. Dad cooks his famous grilled ribs. I knew it. I knew exactly why she was calling. It wasn't an ordinary family dinner. This was the dinner where they were supposed to tell me about Jennifer's brilliant plan. I nodded into the phone as if she could see it and answered, Good, I will be there. On Saturday afternoon, I got in the car and drove to my parents', realizing that this might be my last dinner in this house for a long time, but I was ready. When I pulled up, Jennifer's car was already parked in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Emma, Jake, and Sophie running around the backyard, screaming, laughing, and throwing things at each other, while Dad, as always, stood at the grill with an apron and concentrated on turning the ribs. I inhaled, straightened my hair, and headed for the door. Mom opened the door to me with a big smile, hugged me, and said, Perfect timing, we're almost ready to eat. We sat down at a wooden picnic table, painted pale green, in the backyard, which over the years has witnessed all our family gatherings, from birthdays to small reconciliations after quarrels, and even some everyday conversations that remain in memory simply because we were together then. To my surprise, the children behaved relatively calmly, probably because they were outside, where they could run, scream, roll in the grass and not hear constant comments from adults. Jake was making up some kind of weird game with pebbles and sticks. Sophie was spinning around a chaise longue as if playing hide and seek with herself, and Emma was sitting under a tree and pretending to read, but in reality she was just staring at the phone screen and waiting for her mother to pay attention to her. And then, a few minutes after we started eating, Jennifer, without wasting a second, straightened her napkin and, like an actress ready for a monologue, said, I have amazing news. Mom and Dad immediately looked at each other, as if they knew exactly what was going to sound like, and perhaps even participated in the rehearsal. David and I have decided to take our relationship to a new level, Jennifer continued, slightly tilting her head and pursing her lips in a mysterious smile. He's going to move in with me for a few months. It's like a trial period before we talk about getting engaged. That's wonderful, darling, Mom breathed happily, as if she had just been informed of her election victory. It's really wonderful. But the thing is, Jennifer turned to me, and there was that cautious gentleness in her voice that usually precedes a big, uncomfortable request. He's not ready to fully immerse himself in family matters yet. He needs a little time to get used to it, so I thought maybe Emma, Jake, and Sophie could stay with you for a while. Well, exactly until David gets used to the idea of children. I nodded and continued eating the ribs. Jennifer seemed to take my silence as a sign of agreement and continued enthusiastically. It's only going to last a few months. I know you'll need help during the day while you're at work, So I thought you could find a babysitter after all. You don't have children of your own, you have more flexibility with finances, right? I nodded again, carefully nibbling on the bone. Everything was boiling inside me, but my face remained calm, almost expressionless. Jennifer was talking faster and faster, as if she was afraid that if she stopped talking, I might change my mind. As soon as David sees how good I am in a relationship, she continued with a twinkle in her eyes, he will be ready to meet the children and become a real stepfather to them. It's perfect for everyone. Mom immediately picked it up. We think this is a great opportunity for Jennifer to secure her future, and the kids like spending time with you. You're like a second mom to them. Dad nodded, adding his weight to the collective pressure. This is very important for Jennifer's happiness. This may be her chance to give her children a real family. I finished the last bite, wiped my hands carefully with a napkin, folded it and calmly asked, "When did you think about it?" Jennifer, as if a little embarrassed, replied, "Well, I was hoping maybe next Saturday. David's lease expires at the end of the month and we want to start over, so yes, next Saturday," she smiled. "I know it won't be for long, but you get along so well with them, and you don't really have anything else to do." I smiled back for the first time all evening. "Really? That sounds good." Jennifer's face flushed with happiness. "Really? Oh my God, Gina. Thank you very much. It will change everything. The kids will love living with their aunt, and David will love me without any distractions." We finished dinner, and I helped clear the table and load the dishes into the dishwasher. As if nothing had happened, Jennifer literally glowed as she told me about her plans to renovate her apartment to make it look more grown up, without toys and school drawings hanging on the walls. "I'll bring them back on Saturday morning," she said casually. "With all their stuff, they will need school uniforms, books, all kinds of supplies because they will stay for the whole week, of course. I'll give you money for a babysitter as soon as David and I get settled, I promise." I just nodded. That night, as I was about to leave, Jennifer hugged me as tightly as she hadn't done in years. "I love you so much, Gina. You're saving my life," she whispered in my ear. I drove back to my new apartment, which none of my family even knew about, and I smiled all the way, not because it was funny, but because I finally felt that I was not just in the role of a victim, but in the role of the author of my own life. Saturday was going to be especially interesting. That morning, I woke up early in my new apartment, which still smelled of fresh paint, made coffee and settled on the windowsill. From where I had a view of the river, sparkling like liquid glass under the sun, I watched the birds soar into the sky, the water flowing without stopping, and I knew that somewhere in the city, at exactly 9:00 am, Jennifer was already pulling up to the door of my old apartment with 3 children wrapped in jackets and enough luggage for several months, perhaps. She is happily aroused. Perhaps she is already anticipating how to get rid of this burden, in order to let the love of her life into her life. The only thing she didn't know was that I was no longer there. My phone rang at 9:15 am, and when the screen lit up with Jennifer's name, I didn't hesitate for a second, just transferred the call to voicemail, letting that high-pitched, alarm vibrating tone go unanswered. 5 minutes later, the bell rang again, then another one. By 9:25, I had already turned off the sound, returned to my coffee and the morning peace that I had cherished for so long as something fragile in need of protection. By 10 in the morning, I had 12 missed calls and 15 text messages, and although something was uncomfortably constricted in my chest, I nevertheless opened them, like opening a letter in which you know in advance that nothing good will happen. "Where are you, Gina? We're standing outside your apartment but no one's answering. Why is there a phone number on the door?" "We called. It's your landlord. He said you moved out. What's happening?" "It's not funny. David has to move in today." And then the calls from my parents started. Mom's name flashed on the screen over and over again, like a lighthouse on stormy water. Dad, as always more concise, sent just one message. "Call us immediately, your sister needs you." And at 11:00 am, when I was already sitting on the living room floor and thinking about taking a walk along the river, I received a long message from Jennifer. "I don't understand what's going on. Your landlord says you moved out last week. Where are you? David will arrive in the afternoon with his things. The children are scared and confused. Please call me back." I looked at the screen, at these lines full of anguish and drama, and suddenly I felt an icy calm coming on inside. I put my phone on silent mode, put on my sneakers and went for a walk along the river. letting the sun warm my face and the rustle of the water lull all disturbing thoughts like an old lullaby. When I returned an hour later, there were already 23 missed calls on the screen. The messages changed their tone from worried to desperate. "Gina, please, I'm begging you, I do not know what to do with the children. David just called. He's loading the truck. I need you to take Emma, Jake, and Sophie right now. My whole future depends on it. You can't do this to me." I sighed, made myself lunch, fried rice with vegetables, and, sitting down by the window, opened a book. The phone continued to vibrate somewhere in the other room like an annoying mosquito that you chase away but don't kill because you just don't want to get dirty. Around 4 in the afternoon, I received another message from Jennifer, short as a needle. "I hate," followed by another. "You." At 6 p.m., Rachel called. She was always one step wiser, one step calmer than Jennifer, and we had a special understanding since childhood. When I saw her name, I answered anyway. "Gina, thank God you answered. I just talked to your mom. What's going on?" she asked. And for the first time that day, I felt something thaw inside me. I told her everything about the endless shifts, about the broken TV, about trying to explain to my parents that I'm not insensitive, just tired. I told her about Jennifer's plan to dump the kids on me, while she lives a fabulous life with a man who doesn't know about her real reality. She told me how every time I raised my voice or tried to say no, I was accused of being selfish, of not understanding what it was like to be a single mother. Rachel was silent for a long time, then she said, "Oh my God, Gina. I had no idea it was that bad." I just nodded, and my voice was as steady as a calm lake. No one knew because every time I started talking I was gagged, so I just disappeared. "Have you moved?" she asked. "Yes, I have a new apartment now on the other side of the city. No one can find me, and that's great." "And now what?" "What is it?" she asked. "I don't know, but I know for sure that I will no longer be a free babysitter for Jennifer." "Well done," Rachel said, and for the first time in her voice, I heard the same hardness that had only recently appeared in my own. "Honestly, well done." 2 weeks have passed. Rachel called again, and this time she sounded excited, like someone who had just witnessed something from a soap opera. "You won't believe it, I found out everything about what happened to David. When Jennifer couldn't leave the kids with you, she got stuck. He arrived in a truck, ready to move, and now there were 3 children he had never heard of." Jennifer had to admit that she had been lying for months. "He was furious, Gina. He turned the truck around and drove off. He just left." I listened and frankly wasn't surprised. I felt sorry for the children. Really, they didn't deserve to be a secret. They didn't deserve to be a burden that needed to be hidden while Mom was trying to please a man. Rachel sighed. Let's just say she's not in the best shape right now. He's calling the whole family, trying to find someone who can convince you to come back. But honestly, Gina, people are starting to see the light. Uncle Mike, for example, asked my mother directly, "Why do you have to raise Jennifer's children when Jennifer herself has to do it?" A few days later, when I was almost used to the silence and freedom I allowed myself, the phone rang, and the screen displayed the very familiar name that usually made my heart skip a beat. "Mom." I froze for a moment, already intending not to answer, to let the call go into the void like dozens of previous ones, but something inside still pushed me to press the green handset. "Gina," she said with restraint, her voice sounding cold, distant, as if there was a huge gap between us. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything, letting her continue. "You ruined your sister's life," she said without pause, as if it were not a thought but a sentence. "David was the perfect man for her, and now he's gone because you refused to help your family." I sighed, resting my free hand on the arm of the chair. "Mom, Jennifer ruined her relationship by herself. She lied. She lied to the man she hoped to build a future with, and she expected me to help her support this lie. Mom didn't back down. She was just trying to protect her future, and you exclude yourself from this family by your selfishness." I felt something constrict in my chest, not from resentment, but from long-term accumulated fatigue. "You expelled me first when you decided that my life didn't have the same value as Jennifer's. When you decided that my feelings, my peace, my job, and my dreams were just resources for your youngest daughter." She stopped talking. There was a pause on the line, and I thought I could even hear her breathing heavily. "What do you want from us, Gina?" she finally asked. I answered evenly and calmly, with a confidence that I had lacked before. "I want you to understand that I am not Jennifer's backup parent, not her free babysitter. I have my own life. Does this mean that you will never help with the children again?" Her voice became thinner. It means that I will never be taken for granted again, I replied. If we ever restore relations, it will be on equal terms. It looks like we have nothing more to talk about, she said. Probably not, I said, and then she hung up. That evening, I received a text from Jennifer. It was short, almost cut out with a knife. You're dead to me, I'll never see you again, you ruined my life and I will never forgive you. I read it, put down my phone, and 10 minutes later I did what I'd been thinking about for weeks. I went into my bank account, found the tab with automatic payments, and canceled the monthly transfer of half of Jennifer's rent. The money disappeared from her future budget, just as I disappeared from her. Convenient survival scheme. I took a screenshot of the cancellation, attached it to the message and wrote, "Since I'm dead to you anyway, I've decided that you don't need my help with the rent anymore." Then I blocked her number, then my mom's number and dad's, and suddenly the air became clearer, my head clearer, and the world quieter. For the first time in 2 years, my weekends were mine. I could make plans without thinking about when Jennifer would reappear with 3 children and a tired face. I could stay late after work and have a glass of wine with my colleagues without checking my phone for urgent requests. I could finally just live. Amy, my loyal friend, threw me a belated birthday party, the one I missed because of another family drama. We were eating strawberry shortcake, drinking champagne from plastic glasses, and she suddenly said, "It's like you've become different, happier." I smiled. I feel different. It's like I can breathe again. It's been 3 months since I disappeared from my family's life. I do not know when or even if our next conversation will happen. Part of me misses them, especially for the children, for their naive questions, for the drawings they gave me, for their little jokes and restlessness. But I don't miss the constant feeling of guilt, the endless expectation that I should, must over and over again. I don't miss the feeling that my time and my efforts are worthless. Sometimes Rachel tells me, "What's going on?" She says that Jennifer was forced to move to a cheaper apartment. Renting without my help became unaffordable for her. She says that she has a new boyfriend, but this time she claims she immediately told him that she has 3 children. Now that I'm out of their reach, my parents are helping more with the kids, and oddly enough, they suddenly realize that they can do something without me. Maybe someday everything will change. Maybe Jennifer will have the courage to apologize. Maybe parents will realize that loving your family doesn't mean sacrificing your whole life for it. But before that happens, I'm learning to put myself first. I'm learning not to feel guilty for breathing freely. And you know, it's a very pleasant feeling.